let's just get to the sort of truth here, which is the last government set the targets and then didn't do the work, right? And so we've come to office, and I'm glad we've got onto this, with only 1/3 of the reductions necessary covered by credible plans according to the CCC. Now, I'll just be honest with you, we faced a choice. We could have said, well, look, the last government has left us in the lurch, so let's downgrade our targets. That wasn't the choice we've made, because I think that'd be the wrong thing for the country. But you're absolutely right. We are now running to catch up with what we've inherited. I think whether it's about the process as to what happened, I'm not sure that's really the case. I think the only other point I'd make is, look, in 2026 we will be 12 years away from the beginning of the Carbon Budget 7 period. So I think we just need to take away and think carefully about what is the right level of information we can provide. I think it's got to be enough information, absolutely, that Parliament can make an informed judgment on these issues. But when exactly we get to the carbon budget delivery plan, we'll come back to you on.
Okay, thanks, Secretary of State. So as you've pointed out, you inherited a woeful situation in which there are completely inadequate plans for meeting the existing targets. In that context, and specifically referring back to what you said in answer to the very first question relating to COP29, which was people can't say you're saying one thing and doing another, would you agree that major infrastructure investment decisions or permission decisions, such as, for example, airport expansion, should not be taken before we get the forthcoming advice this month from the Committee on Climate Change, and that such policies, such as airport expansion, are, as the Committee on Climate Change previously said, incompatible with meeting the targets we already have?
Well, let me answer this sort of carefully, because I think it's sort of important. I think it's important, and I will go into a little bit of detail on this, if I may, Chair, because this is really the heart of the matter on one of the most important issues on aviation. So on aviation, the way I've always thought about this is our goal is neither on the one hand to stop people going on holiday, stop the economy getting what it needs on the one hand, nor is it business as usual as if climate change is not a problem, right? And I think that is a sensible middle ground of this debate. And to make that a reality, we have a system in this country of carbon budgets. And so it's really important to say this. Any decisions about airport expansion take place within that framework. That is a legally binding framework passed by the 2008 Climate Change Act. And this government is committed to upholding the rule of law. So any decisions on aviation expansion must be made within that framework. And any aviation expansion will only be able to go ahead if it is consistent with our carbon budgets.
And the Committee on Climate Change in its previous advice said that airport expansion was not consistent with our carbon budgets.
What the climate change...
What's changed?
What the climate change progress report said, that no airport... They said that no airport expansion should take place without a UK-wide capacity management framework. And look, I absolutely agree with the CCC, and I want to be absolutely clear about this, that any aviation expansion must be accounted for as part of carbon budgets. On their balanced pathway was a 25% increase in passenger numbers by 2050.
Which is within existing airport capacity.
Now, we have a range of mechanisms to make sure that any aviation expansion is consistent with our carbon budgets. I actually think maybe it doesn't look like it, but I think we agree about this, which is any aviation expansion must be justified within the framework of carbon budgets. And I can absolutely assure you that is the position of the government. And that is the basis, without anticipating anything that might be announced or might not be announced, that is absolutely the basis on which the government stands.
In that case, Secretary of State, given that aviation expansion will increase emissions from the aviation sector, which sectors are you suggesting should contract their emissions even further in order to accommodate any proposed airport expansion?
Well, look, that is a specific question about the pathway of aviation emissions, and that depends on a whole range of factors, as you will know, including the use of sustainable aviation fuel, airport efficiency, and what other decisions are done. I think, but I think I just wanted to sort of provide this reassurance, because you've made a really important point. Carbon Budget 7 comes out next month. That will be very, very important, because that will give a greater sense of the pathway for framing decisions the government makes. So just I just want to sort of provide this element of reassurance to you, which is 100%. Any aviation expansion must be justified within carbon budgets, and if it can't be justified, it won't go ahead.
Thank you. So one final question on this. Just very briefly, based on what you've just said, Secretary of State, does that mean the government will make no announcements on airport expansion until that advice from the CCT has been published next month to provide that framework?
I'm not going to get ahead of any announcements that might or might not be made, but I want to give you this very strong reassurance that the government's position is very clear, which is, and it goes back to the conversation we had earlier, aviation expansion, if it happens, where it happens, must be justified by reference to carbon budgets. And it goes to this broader point, Chair. I think it's really important to make this point, which is we are absolutely committed to growth as our number one mission. We are also, because it's part of our mission, shared across government by the Prime Minister, by the Chancellor, we are absolutely committed to making good on our mission around not just clean power by 2030, but accelerating to net zero and meeting our carbon budgets. And that is a whole of government commitment.
Just on the question about the airports, I think the DFT analysis 2020, I don't imagine it's changed hugely, said that the expansion of Heathrow would mean a shift of 27,000 jobs and £42 billion in GDP from other regions to London and the South East. As the MP in Doncaster, for Doncaster North, if it's still called that, you have obviously, I believe, supported the plans for Doncaster Airport. Were you sort of in despair when you heard this sort of announcement around Heathrow expansion, or do you really feel that it doesn't undermine what you're trying to achieve? You're
very tempting, Chair. I've always thought that, but you're not going to tempt me into speculation on this question about Heathrow.
But you're not sort of leaping to defend it. You're choosing not to answer.
I'm not going to look. I think there's obviously public debate on these questions, but the government will make its intentions clear at the appropriate moment, and I don't think it's helpful for me to speculate on it.
But you're still supporting the Doncaster expansion?
Yeah, and look, it goes back to the point I made earlier, which is, and I've always thought this, including 15 years ago when I was last doing this job, which is there's two edge positions, which is, people should never be flying, we can just carry on with total business as usual, and I subscribe to neither position. The right position is, and this is the CCC position, this goes back to the question earlier, is to have this within a framework. I might add, by the way, that when we were having these debates previously, it's relatively recent, going back to the question earlier, it's relatively recent that the aviation, including international aviation, is actually included in carbon budgets, and I think that was a positive step, but it's got to be accounted for within that framework.